first category meets the submittal requirements is the 25 points, and then they can earn the 75 points once they get the interview and they demonstrate these different points because you haven't asked them to outline it. And on that first category of meeting the submittal requirements, even though it sounds like it's a checklist, you may give somebody more points because they gave you 10 references that were phenomenal as opposed to somebody who wrote down 2 names of somebody you never heard of. So that may be the difference between it's responsive, so we'll give that 1 point where it goes above and beyond, we'll give it 5 points. So
That's true, that's a really good point.
So I see your point. The point is to look at this document holistically for the entire selection process, from the paper process to the interview process.
and I suspect that's how that was intended based on the RFQ really addresses only that first category.
So then this, would that be the only category that we would really be considering prior to the interviews?
So I think you certainly could do the, decide the whole package now where you could focus just on that first part. I think the critical part for you, if I could suggest for tonight, would be that first category. But if you're able to get through and come up with what you, since you will be involved in the whole process of the selection process of these other categories, how have you envisioned that they might work during the interviews?
For the sake of transparency and fairness, then I think if we do it the way you're suggesting, at least that gives everybody who's met the minimal submission requirements a chance to come make their case, and then they get ranked on the rest of their submission. And that creates the opportunity for nobody to say that they weren't considered once they met their initial requirement of submission.
And, well, at some point you're going to have to narrow based on what you're doing, how many people are going to be interviewed. So again, I'm sharing my reading just because I've worked, we've been on the other side of these before, where we're the ones being evaluated, where you have a potential 25 points for that meet the submittal requirements. There are, I don't know if it's coincidental or not, 5 categories there that do track the categories in the RFQ. If you gave each of those 5 points, you might find that you ended up with 4 candidates that had 23, 24, 25 points and 10 other candidates that had 15, and that might influence where you go to the next step.
I think, I'm gonna, I agree with you 100%, and I'm glad you've given it such a careful reading, and perhaps seeing it from both sides has also been helpful. But this isn't just a 0 or a 25, as you point out, and if we considered each of the 5 categories 0 to 5, we probably will find that there's a group that falls out as a smaller group that we want to interview. I would worry a lot about interviewing everyone who just turns in these forms, because we could be up for a lot of interviews, some of which we might know before we even start that we are likely to hire. So I move that we use this, we agreed tonight on how to use the meets the submittal requirements criteria and use that for screening for our initial applicants. And that then we can decide whether or not we want to go ahead and discuss these other areas tonight, or defer that to a later meeting. So I'm making a motion that we focus in just on the first one for tonight. So a second? So I move that we approve using meets the submittal requirements for our initial paper screening that's used to develop a list of people who we interview.
Are you then suggesting we don't change the point ranking on that one category?
Now that I see it as a 5-part standalone item, I think that having 25 points makes sense. When it was looked at as part of the rest of the items, it didn't make sense, but now it does make sense to me to do 25 points.
I
Sure, I think you need to make a
gotta
motion and a second before there's
You're right.
discussion. So, is there a second to that motion? Or can we just go, we can discuss now? Yes? Okay.
Well, my concern is that if we basically leaving meets the submittal requirements as is at 25 points, 0 to 25, until we gather applications or submittals. And then we proceed with the balance of this. My concern is that because this is a very aggressive timeline, I keep worrying that we're, taking too long to do everything, that we decide tonight for everything on here, rather than waiting until we've got people that we're gonna talk to. I mean, we're really working within a 3-week period of time.
That makes sense to me. Playing the devil's advocate, what would happen then when we rated someone based on the paperwork on all these categories, then subsequently interviewed them, we'd probably be adding, changing our numbers at that time based on an oral interview. Would that be a problem?
I think that if you hold on to these and keep these as your scoring criteria, and the scoring it's a guide for you. It's a guide for the subcommittee to make a decision. And you're all going to be scoring very different, probably in every single area. So I think that if you, it's something that could be given to me after you review the proposal, I can maintain them and then you hand them out again when we have the interviews. That's an option for you.
Well, we certainly need to know the answer to number 2 before we select people for interviews. Mr. Togner?
Keeping in mind that resumes or proposals are to eliminate people, because you will eliminate most of them. And if you use the first 2 criteria, you give them a 0 to 25 score, and you also look at their proposal as to whether or not there's a conflict of interest. If there's a conflict of interest, there's a 0. And you eliminate them. And then you pick the top 3, the top 2, the top 4, whatever you want to interview. You might have 50 proposals. You're not going to interview 50 people unless you're really masochistic. But no, so the first 2 criteria can be evaluated to a certain extent, and then when you're in the interview process, you start with the second criteria again. You verify that there isn't a conflict of interest, and then you rank the others.
Background and information as listed in item 1, of course, is going to include a lot of the items that subsequently are ranked. So in a way, it's kind of redundant, and just a comment to consider.
Madam Chair, if I can make a suggestion. I'm okay with, I think we're talking about 2 separate things, talking about process and then the actual tool itself. The tool itself and then how to proceed with using the tool. So I see your point, which is the first 2 categories really help set process for elimination. But I do hear Ms. Rico in terms of, I don't think that could preclude us from having a conversation about the other aspects right now. Because it sounds like, and Ms. Rico, that you disagree with proceeding with understanding how these 2 top categories really are about helping us eliminate folks. Then it sounds like we're all in agreement.
Yes, this gives us plenty of leeway here. We're not all going to agree, we're not all going to support them the same way.
It just means, though, I agree with you, having conversation about clarity on the rest of the categories at the same time, that we agree on this protocol about how we will move forward in the selection process.
Given though what was said, I think I would agree that 25 points is probably a good number for the first one. Now that we see it
would this be a time, the question that the board would want to talk, or something to talk for a second about the conflict of interest, or was that premature?
Could you explain in more
So I
detail?
guess my concern here is that the board president, and I don't fault him for this, picked an attorney who I believe an outside third party later discovered there was a conflict of interest. And asking a law firm to know the history of the district and the relatives of former trustees, that's a big, I mean, that's tough. And I'm just wondering if the board, or anyone else has thought about, how do you screen people for conflict of interest in that sense? Maybe you want to defer that.
Ms. Harrington?
Well, my question is I mentioned that in the request for, about that.
I don't believe the way the RFQ is put together, it is set up to use that as a screening criteria. And I think that was probably intentional for the very reason it was just raised, because if you'd ask my law firm, do you have a relationship with X? We're gonna run a search in a computer database, but we're not just gonna put it, we don't know all the names to enter until you tell us.
Right,
You know, this person is that person, is their connection. And so I had been interpreting that conflict of interest part really as part of the interview, or there could be an intervening step where it's a funnel, you get 15 responses, you eliminate it to 10 that look good, and then you send a follow-up questionnaire to them. Is there anybody in your firm who has ever worked with any of the following? You give them a specific list of names they can search. 3 come back and say, yes, we worked with such and such. Well, all of a sudden you've got 7 to narrow it down to now.
How would we select those names?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Interesting question. I mean, certainly, one thing that was not, I think, considered before, and typically wouldn't have been considered, is here's the names of all the members of the Board of Trustees and senior cabinet level administrators in that time, and you know, search the last names. For example, we want you to do a search not just on the first and last name, but we ask that you search in your databases for anybody with those last names and identify it. Or you could give them a list of names. Here's the names of our parents, here's the names of our...
What about our construction firms?
Yes, the contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, have you ever represented them? Have you ever... And it's at both points. Have you ever represented them? Have you ever opposed them in court? You might want to know both, because you want